Okay, well, it says that I'm supposed to be live. Let me know if it is. Thank you, Kelly. Welcome to the regular Tuesday Night live horror reading. And let's see how we're looking on Facebook. I'm streaming to Facebook too. I know it's just some craziness. Craziness is going on. All right, let's see here. Yeah, it says I'm live. Hey, I think I did this right. All right, welcome everyone. Mitch, Alan mentioned your name the other day. We were worried about you. Haven't seen you in a while. Glad to see you here. If you're watching on Facebook and you're thinking to yourself, what the hell is this? Well, every Tuesday night, every Tuesday night I read horror, some horror fiction for 45 minutes to an hour or so. Hey, Monty. Monty's behind me. Monty the cat. His full name is Guy Montag, but we call him Monty. You cannot have my water. Sorry. You've got your own water, and it's fresh. All right. Go away, little stray. Go away. All right. Sorry about that. But, the cat is the most important thing. Yep, life gets in the way sometimes. If you're watching on Facebook or you're here for the first time, like I was saying, I read some horror stories live every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Of course, if you don't catch me live, you can always watch it later. But it's fun to watch live and text chat with everyone else who is watching. On Thursday nights, same time, 10 p.m. Eastern, I do another little podcast. The big podcast is Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, where my panelists and I interview horror creators. Um, we've ordered, we've ordered, we've interviewed a hell of a lot of them over the years. People like Ramsey Campbell and Paul Tremblay, Laird Barron. I even have to interview John Langan this Sunday. Jeez, jeez, I don't this. Yeah, I did it voluntarily. So, uh, kidding, of course. John has a new collection coming up. No, you are obsessed with my drink called Lost in the Dark by John Langan, and it's great. It's wonderful. So make sure that you get it, pre-order it. Can't remember if it's out yet or if it's going to be out on Tuesday. Anyway, we'll be talking to John, and also we will be talking with Matthew Revert, who did the cover and who's done a lot of covers for horror books over the past few recent years. So it should be a fun time. So, all right. So you say, Mike, you say, what are you going to read tonight? Well, I guess I should know that, shouldn't I? If you are new here, when you listen to me read on Tuesday nights, you also get my commentary on everything. So if you want a real narrator, go to Audible. But of course, this is probably not on Audible here. I'll explain this in a minute. Stranger Than Science, Frank Edwards. Now if you're watching for the first time and you're like, what the heck does this have to do with Lovecraft? Nothing. Nothing. Doesn't have anything to do with Lovecraft. Sometimes we talk about cosmic horror. It's a starting point, so to speak. Sometimes we talk about weird fiction, uh, general horror. We tend to gravitate towards cosmic horror and weird fiction. It's true. We discussed is the 25th anniversary of the film What Lies Beneath. Great movie. You know this if you saw the Sunday episode, but I bring it up again because uh, I got a comment on Facebook like, "What does this have to do with Lovecraft?" And it's a stupid movie with a stupid ending anyway. I was like, "All right, man. Uh, sorry you're having a bad day." I didn't say anything, but yeah, it's just a starting point. Okay, Kim, if your sister is more important than we are, fine, whatever. I hope you had a good time with your sister. That's great. All right, let me say hello. Say we got quite a few people watching live. Alan, of course, my fellow panelist, Alan Hughes, Kelly, Mitch, as I said, good to see you again, Kim, and Suzanne, Mark Jones, and who did I miss? I know I missed somebody. Did I miss anybody? Scott Thomas. Hey, man, how are you? I got I received an email, Scott, last week, and it's from the agent or publicist or somebody who works with the other Scott Thomas. And he's got another book coming out, wanted to know if I wanted to interview him. And I said, sure. But there are two, Madeline, hey, Chess. There are two um, Scott Thomas writers out there. And I'm friends with one of them. He's a really wonderful weird fiction and horror writer. And I'm just discovering the other Scott Thomas, but I like what I see so far. Now they have to fight. What do you think, Scott? Anyway, I'll keep you posted on that. But anyway, this Sunday I'm going to interview John Langan and Matthew Revert, the artist. I think most people listening to me are probably familiar with John Langan. You know, it would be fun if I had you on the same episode, Scott. Um, so, um, I thought I would do a little bit of an lot. Most of the time I read horror, but a lot of the time, but tonight I wanted to do a little Art Bell kind of thing. And when I was 10 or 11, I I found this book. This is probably somewhere around 1982. Now, my mother would take my sister and I out to secondhand places sometimes on a Saturday to get look for clothes, look for other things, mostly clothes. And I would go back then places like Salvation Army and DAV. They had a book section too, used books. It had a little bit of everything, I think. And so one Saturday, I discovered this book's called Stranger Than Science: Astonishing Stories of Strange Events, all authentic, all absolutely true. And when I remembered about this book a few years ago and was able to find a couple of inexpensive copies online. I don't know how much they are now. Here's another edition. A fascinating collection of 73 weird, fully documented stories taken from life that modern science is still powerless to explain. Once you have started this book, there is no laying it aside until every one of the intriguing stories has been read. Oh, you have it, Pat. Yeah. So really nostalgic for me to have discovered it again some years ago. Now, we didn't have the internet in 1982. It is, Alan. It is kind of like a 40 in times. So I couldn't check this stuff. Is it really true? Absolutely true? Documented? Well, no, not really. Some of it is true. Some of it is kind of half true. Some of it I couldn't find at all. I haven't looked lately, but just to let you know. Yeah, we did have Usenet, but I didn't know that. It's a good point, though. Could I have gotten on Usenet with my Commodore 64, Kelly? Probably, right? It comes from a syndicated radio program called Stranger Than Science. Now, this was 1982, but the book was published in like 1950, in the 50s, 1956 or something like that. Let's see. 1959. And it was reprinted several times, if that tells you anything about the popularity of this book, or at least how well it's sold. And I thought I'd read a couple of them, maybe 4 or 5. So take it with a grain of salt, and just it's fun for me, and it's entertaining. It's an entertaining book and very nostalgic. So, all right, I'm going to read the first one, and the very first one in the book. I'm going to read the first one first. Hope you guys are doing okay. I realized tonight that I've been doing the Tuesday night show for 13 months now. The first episode was on June 18th. So that's pretty cool. We've been doing the Sunday show for like 13 years. All right, The Mystery of David Lang. That's too bright. All right. Is it possible for a human being to literally walk off the earth in full view of witnesses? Before you answer, I suggest that we consider the case of David Lang. It happened in the twinkling of an eye on a bright, sunshiny afternoon. The date was September 23, 1880. The place was the farm of David Lang, a few miles from Gallatin, Tennessee. Fate had set the scene of this tragic mystery in pleasing surroundings. Lang's home was a rambling brick house, almost covered with vines. Before it lay a 40-acre pasture, cropped close by the cattle that was now browned by the long summer dry spell, which had not yet come to an end. What is my cat doing? Oh, God only knows. On that particular afternoon, really, Felix says some of his stuff was borrowed from Ambrose Bierce. I can believe it. On that particular afternoon, Lang's 2 children, George, 8, and his daughter, 11-year-old Sarah, were playing with a new wooden wagon pulled by wooden horses, a toy their father had brought back from Nashville that morning. The youngsters were pulling the toy around in the front yard as their mother and father came out of the house. Mrs. Lang said to her husband, "Hurry back, Dave. I want you to drive me into town before the stores close." Mr. Lang by now had reached the fence on his way across the pasture to see his beautiful quarter horses, of which he was understandably proud. He stopped at the fence to look at his, he stopped at the fence to look at his big pocket watch. With a wave of his hand, he said, "I'll be back in just a few minutes." But he never came back, for David Lang was only 30 seconds from his rendezvous with fate, whatever it was. The youngsters spotted a horse and buggy coming up the long lane toward the house and stopped their play to watch it, for they recognized it as the conveyance of Judge August Peck, who always had presents for them. Mrs. Lang saw the carriage, as did David, for he waved at the judge and turned to come back to the house. Monty is being a spaz tonight. I do want to check, make sure the volume is okay on Facebook. Yep, it is. All right. Sorry about that. Oh, you can borrow it for free on archive.org. That's good to know. David Lang had not taken more than half a dozen steps when he disappeared in full view of all those present. Mrs. Lang screamed. The children, too startled to realize what had happened, stood mutely. Instinctively, they all ran toward the spot where Lang had last been seen, just a few seconds before. Judge Peck and his companion, the judge's brother-in-law, scrambled out of their buggy and raced across the field. The five of them arrived on the spot of Lang's disappearance almost simultaneously. There was not a tree, not a bush, not a hole to mar the surface, and not a single clue to indicate what had happened to David Lang. The grown-ups searched the field around and found nothing. Mrs. Lang became hysterical and had to be led screaming into the house. Meanwhile, neighbors had been alerted by the frantic ringing of a huge bell that stood in the side yard, and they spread the alarm. By nightfall, scores of people were on the scene, many of them with lanterns. They searched every foot of the field in which Lang had last been seen a few hours before. They stamped their feet on the dry, hard sod in hope of detecting some hole into which he might have fallen, but they found none. David Lang was gone. He had vanished in full view of his wife, his two children, and the two men in the buggy. One second he was there, walking across the sunlit field. The next instant, he was gone. In the weeks that followed, authorities had to take steps to keep curiosity seekers away from the farm. Mrs. Lang was bedridden from the shock of the experience. All the servants left, with the exception of the old family cook, Suki, and thanks to Judge Peck, some measure of peace and quiet was restored. That's interesting, Felix. Yeah, when I was 10 or 11 reading this for the first time, I was just fascinated. Um, Bad news to YouTube chats. Of course, a lot of it is, most of it, if not, is apocryphal, or it comes from uh, a true story and it's been embellished somewhat. Who knows? Subsequent, but they're fun. If I look at them kind of as weird fiction stories whenever I glance through the book again. So, subsequent examination of the witnesses disclosed that they had all seen the same thing at the same time and place. The country surveyor probed the field where Lang had vanished and found it to be solidly supported by a thick layer of limestone, without sinks or caves, without sinkholes or caves. Hey, somebody look up David Lang for me on the Google in the on the internets. There was never a funeral nor even a memorial service for Mr. Lang. His wife, who lived many years after the event, clung to the hope that somehow, sometime David Lang would return. Eventually, she let Judge Peck rent out the farm, with the exception of the field in front of the house. That pasture she left untouched as long as she lived. With the passage of time, the excitement which followed the remarkable disappearance of David Lang subsided. Winter came, and spring again. Mrs. Lang had sold her horses, so Judge Peck pastured his own horses in the field. As strange as the disappearance itself was the experience which befell Lang's two youngsters one still warm evening in April of 1881, about 7 months after he had vanished. The children noticed that at the spot where he had last been seen, there was a circle of stunted yellow grass, some 15 feet in diameter. On that evening, as they stood beside the circle, 11-year-old Sarah called to her father, and to their astonishment, the youngsters heard his voice calling faintly for help over and over until it faded away forever. Well, I read that first story in the secondhand store, and I was hooked, and that ending just haunted me, you know. So it's interesting as long as you take it with a grain of salt and maybe a few grains of salt. All right, I wanted to read, let's see here. Oh, page 33. Okay, there we go. This is kind of amusing. Page 30. All right, this one's called Famous Last Words. I haven't Googled this story, but everything in here could be true since there's nothing supernatural in this actual story. It's just interesting. Yeah, thank you, Alan. All right. A Roman soldier brandished his short, two-handed sword menacingly around the head of the old man seated on the floor. Archimedes, one of the greatest of early Greek scholars, never bothered to look up. The soldier ordered the old man to rise and follow him. Archimedes said, "No, not until I have finished my problem." A moment later, the sword in the hands of a nameless soldier brought an end to the career of one of the greatest thinkers of all time. Henry Ward Beecher, stormy and controversial pulpit figure of the mid-19th century, had preached to millions during his lifetime. He had counseled them to be ready for the grim reaper, and he had pictured for them what lay beyond the grave. As Beecher himself lay gasping out his last breath, he pulled the physician down to him and whispered hoarsely, "Doctor, now comes the mystery." Greetings, Eric. Thanks for joining us. Tuesday night horror narration, except this isn't really horror tonight. Anne Boleyn, am I saying that correct? Anne Boleyn, consort of the king, was ready to pay with her life for her involvement with royalty. She was calm to the last. Turning to a companion who was trembling violently, Anne said, "Take courage. The executioner is an expert of many years' training, and my neck is very slender." Yes, it is, Eric. Outside the bedchamber of Queen Elizabeth, scores of persons knelt to pray for her. The Queen, attended by the finest physicians of her time, not the latest Queen Elizabeth, no doubt. Oh, it's Anne Boleyn. Thanks, Jess. The Queen, attended by the finest physicians of her time, was struggling to the last. As the pale horseman drew nearer and nearer, she could no longer deny the inevitable to herself. Shaking a clenched fist at her own impotence, she said, "All of my possessions for one moment of time." Cardinal Wolsey, like many another who aspired to greatness, became entangled in the political toils of his time and paid for it with his life. As he faced the executioner, he said, "Had I but served my God with but half the zeal that I served my king, he would not have left me in my gray hairs." I don't know, man. Mysterious ways and all that, you know. William Porter, known to millions for his delightful short stories written under the name of O. Henry, was ill for a long time before he realized that the end was near. He clutched the hand of a close friend who sat beside his bed. For a long minute, there was no sound except his labored breathing. Then at last, the famous writer said, "Charlie, I'm afraid to go home in the dark." Sir Thomas More was being led to the scaffold blindfolded. He asked that the bandage be removed, and to his jailer he remarked, "See me safely up the gibbet, sir. On the downward voyage, let me shift myself." Shift, not ship. Shift for myself. John Barrymore was another whose sense of humor was with him to the last. He had been unconscious and near death for hours when he suddenly regained consciousness. With his last bit of strength, he managed a faint, puckish grin as he said to his friend Gene Fowler, "Tell me, Gene, are you really the illegitimate son of Buffalo Bill?" We've had a few more people join us. If this is your first time, our big our big podcast is on Sundays, live on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, on YouTube and now on Facebook. Uh, but in this past year, I've started reading horror stories live on Tuesday nights at 10 Eastern, and a sort of late night, mm, radio host type of podcast on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. The story does not say if they're leeches or not, Kelly, but I know they've been a great help for me with my illness. So, leeches. Dr. Samuel Garth, famous physician who had made a fortune ministering to the elements of Renaissance royalty, had one last request to make of the fellow physicians who gathered around his bedside. "Please, gentlemen," he said, "stand back and let me die a natural death." Facebook people have their own chat, uh, and that's still not a lot of people watching live on that one. Most people are watching later, um, but that'll grow. So, gotta walk before I can run. And Hobbes, consultant to the great and near great of his day, said, "I go now to take my last voyage, a leap in the dark." All right, Chaz, we've got another pronunciation one for you. The Countess of Rouen, Rouen. The Countess of Rouen was famed for her impeccable manners. As the end for her drew near, a servant tiptoed into the room and announced that a visitor wished to see the Countess. The courteous lady had the servant write a card which said, The Countess of Rowan sends her compliments, but begs to be excused. She is engaged in dying. James Smithson, founder of the world famous Smithsonian Institution in Washington, was a very unusual man in many ways, and he had a knack for wry humor that was with him to the last. His fatal illness was one which the doctors had not been able to diagnose. When he realized that little time was left, he called his physicians to him and said, "I want you to perform an autopsy to discover what is wrong with me. I'm dying for you to find out what it is." Okay, we got a few more here. Community, that's what we're all about here. So thanks for spending part of your Tuesday evening with me, guys. Here's the last one. Thomas Edison's last remark left to puzzle the family. Yeah, I need some Googling or searching on this one. Thomas Edison's last remark left a puzzled family. The great inventor was not an atheist, as some have claimed. Neither did he discuss his beliefs, whatever they were, with those nearest to him. He was a class A jerk, though, I'll tell you that. As Edison lay dying, slowly and painfully, his wife held his hand. He seemed to be asleep. Other than the labored beating of his heart, the room was perfectly quiet. Suddenly, Mr. Edison sat up in bed without assistance. He opened his eyes and stared straight ahead for several seconds. Then he turned to Mrs. Edison and said, "I am very surprised. It is very beautiful over there." What did he see? Mr. Edison did not say, and no man can tell us. It was probably a beautiful elephant, if he did, Alan. A beautiful, angry elephant. Let's see here. What else should I read? Yes, that's exactly right. Tesla. Um, do dreams come true? Unusual. I don't want to read about dreams. The Man from Nowhere. Icebergs in the Sky. It's neat that one of you, Kelly, right? You got this when you were a kid too. Um, let's see if The Man from Nowhere is the one I'm thinking of. Boy, my little 10 or 11-year-old mind was just, I was just, I could not put this book down. And I reread it several times. Yep, this is it. And I think this is at least based on a true story. But again, if you guys want to Google it, it's always fun, and let the audience know it's fun to know. The Man from Nowhere. He was a strange one, all right. Just as the authorities said, this young man who acted as though he had just dropped in from another world. You hear that train, Chaz? He was just outside the new gate entrance to the city of Nuremberg, Germany, when an inquisitive policeman first noticed him. He was clean, but so poorly dressed that he was almost ragged. The policeman later told his superiors that he had first been attracted to the young man by the difficulty with which he seemed to walk. as though suffering from some deformity which caused him to stumble. His feet were badly swollen. His eyes were squinted against the light. The policeman tried to question the lad, but he learned nothing. Over and over, the stranger kept repeating, "I want to be a soldier like my father was." It did not sound like an expression of determination, but more like a chant, as though the young man who uttered it was merely reciting words that he did not understand. The policeman led him to the station, where the mayor and other dignitaries gathered to observe and question this unusual visitor. In a monotone, the young man continued to repeat his assertion that he wished to be a soldier like his father. This is just, and I hope that I give you guys this feeling, but just, sitting around the virtual campfire, um, telling stories. So his name, he evidently did not understand what they were saying, and he stared blankly. But when a pen was placed in his hand, he giggled nervously and wrote in a slow, legible hand, Casper Hauser. Kasperhauser. He could not or would not write anything else. But on that quiet afternoon in 1828, the young man had inscribed on the records the name that was to mark the beginning of a puzzle which remains unsolved to this day. This day in 1959, anyway. When food was placed before him, he seized it in his hands and crammed it into his mouth as though he were famished. A mug of cold milk was evidently something he had never encountered before, and he recoiled from it. Water he drank, but not until he had sampled it with a forefinger. Just before nightfall, while the baffled city fathers of Nuremberg were trying to decide what to do with their enigmatic visitor, he presented them with two more pieces to the puzzle. Two letters wrapped in rags which he carried inside his tattered vest. One letter purported to be from his mother. Dated 16 years before, it urged anyone who found the boy to send him to Nuremberg when he was 17 so that he could enlist in the 6th Cavalry, of which his father had been a member, according to the letter. The other missive the other missive was badly written and purported to be from someone who had found the boy and cared for him, but who could no longer support him. Oddly, both letters were written on some sort of thin leather or parchment, which was not familiar to the officials at Nuremberg. Caspar Hauser, if that was indeed his name, spent that first night with the city's most learned man, Dr. Dahmer, where the young man promptly astonished his host by trying to pick the flame off of a candle. Further tests brought out that he had no depth perception whatever, and although he seemed to be in full possession of his faculties, they were as undeveloped as those of a baby. Although the condition of his feet and legs indicated that he had walked a considerable distance, no one could be found who had seen him on the road. A reward was offered for anyone who could identify him. Pictures were distributed throughout Europe, but to no avail. The more the officials probed, the deeper the mystery of Caspar Hauser became. Under the kind and patient tutelage of Dr. Dahmer, Caspar Hauser learned quickly first to speak and then to write. He told his newfound friends that he had been raised since infancy in total darkness in a cellar, had never tasted anything except black bread and water, had never seen the man who brought his food, in total darkness. He had seldom heard speech, and then only a few words. But how or why or where he had spent those years, he had no idea. In October of 1829, Casper came stumbling out of Dr. Dahmer's basement, bleeding from a deep gash on the head, which he said had been inflicted by a masked man wielding a long knife. The city officials assigned two policemen to guard him after that. But while they dozed on the afternoon of December 14th, 1833, Caspar Hauser went for a stroll in the park across the street, a stroll from which he came staggering back a few minutes later, dying from a stab wound, which surgeons said could not have been self-inflicted. I don't think we're talking about Jeffrey. Jazz. Different spelling, too. The snow in the park revealed no footprints other than Casper's, and no trace of the weapon. The well-documented facts in the enigma of Caspar Hauser entitle it to a place in the records as one of the strangest cases of its kind. Von Forbach wrote of him, Caspar Hauser showed such ignorance of the simplest facts of life and such horror of the necessities of civilization that one feels driven to believe that he was a native of another planet, transferred by some miracle to our own. So, fascination aside, there are some great story prompts in this book. Let's see, what time is it? I'm doing 45 minutes. They got UFO mysteries in here. All kinds of stuff. The man with the X-ray mind is billionaire beggar. Numbers on the brain. That one's sad. I remember that one. Spies in the skies. Postscript. A guest from the universe. Let's read this one. The case of the very strange shipwreck. What are the question marks, Jess? Page 111. Okay. Wish my left hand just goes numb a lot. Any ghostly ones? Oh, okay. Good question. Pretty sure there are. I could read one next week if in front of whatever else I read. Um, if I don't find it now, there's a really good reincarnation one in here that I remember doing internet searching on, but I don't remember what I came up with. It was years ago. The spark of life, the cursed car. Napoleon's strange death. Oh, here we go. Let's try this one. If you want a ghost, here's one titled, and I don't remember this one at all. Did the victim solve her murder? I'm guessing that's ghost or ghost adjacent. Page 233. Hang on. 233, 233. All right. All right, we're going on faith that this is a ghost story. All right. Did the victim solve her murder? The police were desperate after weeks of investigation had failed to solve the disappearance of Joy Aiken. Did she tell them where to find her killer? Police records say that she did. Science is admittedly operating under difficulties when it endeavors to explore the mind. The very nature of the study precludes success in many respects. Science has learned a great deal about the mind in the past 3 decades. Remember, this is 1959. Thanks to new instruments and new techniques, but reduced to its fundamentals, it becomes a program of the mind, studying the mind, and that complicates the problem. We know that the human mind is capable of some remarkable feats, which we can only record without understanding. That it may also be capable of another and even more incredible attainments is a matter for debate. For example, let us examine the case of Joy Aiken, found in the police records of Pinetown, Natal, South America, under the date of October 9, 1956, attested by 4 police officials and 46 invited witnesses. My nose does not stop itching. Danielle says that means you're going to kiss a fool. Joy Aiken was a few days past 17 when she vanished in mid-September 1956. She was a very pretty girl, and she was also very shy. Joy had no steady boyfriend, and she had no enemies. Why then had she disappeared? Well, there unfortunately are quite a few bad reasons. Her family suspected foul play, and the police concurred. They sent out bulletins bearing her picture to police reports throughout South Africa. A reward was offered for anyone who could provide information leading to the finding of the girl or her body. Weeks passed without results. There were a few crank tips, the usual crackpot reports which are to be expected. And as usual, they came to naught. Joy Aiken had vanished as completely as if the earth had swallowed her, which police suspected was literally true. On that note, when I was 11 or so in Des Moines, Iowa, there was a disappearance of an 11-year-old boy by the name of Johnny Gosh. You've probably heard the name, but he lived probably just a mile or two away from us. He was a newspaper boy, and he just disappeared on his route one day. And I guess this was 1982, and he not one trace of that poor boy has been found since then. It's it's a real mystery, and it's a very sad mystery. His mom has never stopped looking for him. I can't even imagine. But it kind of got to me a little bit, a kid that lived a mile or two away from me, same age as me. Um, I'm sure they can, don't you? Aren't you a Florida guy? Jazz. Jazz says, can people disappear in sinkholes? You would know better than me. The missing girl's brother, Colin Aiken, visited the police station in Pinetown each day in the hope that they might have learned something that would lead them to the end of their search, whatever that might be. Each day they had to tell him that they had found nothing, and by October 8th, they admitted utter defeat. That day, Colin heard through a friend of a retired headmaster of a school, Nelson Palmer, who had located missing items for some of his close personal friends. Mr. Palmer did this, said the friend, by relaxing, closing his eyes, and describing what his mind seemed to see. He was embarrassed by the knowledge that he could do this, and never discussed it for fear of ridicule. Colin Aiken and the Pinetown office of the South Africa Police were of the same opinion. They had nothing to lose by asking Mr. Palmer to try. A senior police officer visited Palmer and his wife that night and finally secured their consent to a meeting on the following day, October 9, 1956. Well, 50 persons sat silently in the two front rooms and hall of Mr. Palmer's home. 50 people. That must have been quite a living room. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His breathing became heavy and labored. Sweat covered his face and began to trickle down from his chin. For minutes, there was only the sound of his breathing, and many who were present began to suspect that that was going to be the extent of the program. Then Palmer's lips began to move, but the sound that came from them was a voice like that of a young girl in terror. And no, I'm not even going to attempt that. I am dead, said the voice. Then there was silence for 2 minutes, according to the police account. After that, Palmer's lips began moving again. My body is in the ravine near the high rocks. A man has attacked me. He is killing me. Palmer's eyes opened, and he seemed to be staring without seeing. A few minutes later, he began breathing normally and arose from the chair. Says the record, Mr. Palmer then told us that the girl's body was partially concealed under some stones near a culvert at a spot about 60 miles from Pinetown. The murderer, he said, was a man named Clarence, about 30 years old, who had hidden the murder weapon, whatever it was, in an outbuilding at his house. Mr. Palmer said that he believed it could lead us to the place where the body was hidden. So the record says. Okay. Excuse me a second. I know, I'm just drawing out the suspense, all right. 1 hour and 40 minutes later, Palmer led police to a lonely spot on the highway near the Natal coast. There, under a culvert and partially hidden by stones, they found the body of the missing girl. Joy Aiken had been beaten and shot to death. What about the killer? Palmer had described him as a man named Clarence. Relatives recalled that Joy had known a chap by that name, Clarence Gordon Van Buren. 10 hours later, police 10 hours later, police placed Van Buren under arrest. In a shed behind his home, they found a gun which he later identified as the murder weapon. It was the old story of a frustrated lover. He had lured her into his car, lost his temper, struck her, then shot her to death in a fit of anger. How did Palmer know where to find the body? Joy's family prefers to think that the dead girl told him, somehow. Palmer scoffs at the idea. Interesting. Nothing supernatural about it, he says. And he adds, I have found missing pieces of jewelry by the same process. And they certainly don't tell me where they are. I think the human mind has some perfectly normal capabilities which we do not understand. And this projection in time is one of them. Interesting. Interesting. So, you guys have put up with me for an hour. I'll find a regular fiction story to read next time. But yeah, something nostalgic for me that I wanted to read, and the stories are interesting. True or untrue, most of them are pretty interesting little stories. Um, yes, thank you, Kelly. Question. Hi, Monty. Question, do you guys want me to read a few more of these next week, or do you want me to do the normal horror story read? I'm fine with either. So if you're watching live, just real quick, put a comment in the side chat. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, you can just comment in the usual spot underneath the show notes, and ditto for Facebook. So there you go. All right, we've got. Maybe I should do a poll on Facebook. We've got Frank says scary stories. Felix and Chaz say more of this one. So, I could do both. I could do 30 minutes, a story or two of this one, and then read something in the normal vein. Here's the other cover. So, but yes, my little 10 or 11-year-old brain was just fascinated. So I thought about it years later, and I just had to find it online and see if I could buy it, and I did. So Madeline says both. So thanks, Madeline. Mitch is up for either. Kim's up for either. Well, I'll figure out something that makes everybody happy, hopefully. And if you have not read this, Madeline just republished this, I should say. Speaking of finding a nostalgic book from my childhood, this is not a children's book. Teenagers can read it. Kids can read it. I think I was 10 or 11. And adults can enjoy it too. It's the first cosmic horror book I ever read without knowing that it was cosmic horror. And it is hard to find used copies. They're pretty expensive. I think I when I talked about it several years ago, a bunch of people bought the secondhand editions, and as a result, the laws of supply and demand, um, the book became pretty expensive. But yeah, that's what I think too, Felix. If it's fiction, it's creepy, and if it's true, it's creepy. So, anyway, back to this book, Displaced Person. You can get it on Kindle. and on and in print. And I can't remember, Madeline, if Amazon did the Kindle version or not, or if you have to go to your website. I can't remember. Um, just Google. I think this will work. If I knew I was going to mention this ahead of time, I would have had the link ready. The author's name is Lee Harding, Displaced Person. Wikipedia page on this book. And you can get on Barnes and Noble. I can't remember your website name. Amazon has a paperback now. What about the Kindle? Let's see. No, not Kindle, but yeah, all right, whatever. Go on Amazon. Search for Displaced Person by Lee Harding. And seriously, if you haven't read this and you listen to me talk about this, weird fiction and cosmic horror, then you need to read it. And tell all your friends. So, Madeline, I don't remember your website address. I'm sorry. It's old age. That's what it is. That's what it is. All right. You guys, put up with me for one more second. I will. All right. Let's add Madeline's name to the Google. Let's see if that helps. Oh, thanks, Madeline. Yeah. Anyway, I've heard there are these little things you can on the internet. You can type in a search query and it gives you results back. So try that. Um, hey, everyone, thank you for spending part of your Tuesday night with me. I'll see you guys again on Thursday night at the same time, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central. And I hope you guys enjoy your week until then. Thanks, everyone, especially to all of you who are patrons. Thank you very much.